Attorney Jeremy Rosenthal is joining me now on the Scott Sand Show, attorney with TexasDefenseFirm.com. As I'm sure everybody knows, but just to reiterate in case you happen to sleep late or something today, President Trump has been reelected as the 47th president of the United States in what appears to be a wider electoral margin than 2016 and even more than Joe Biden won in 2020. But this leads to some other questions that don't really have anything to do with the race or where Kamala Harris fell short. Jeremy, it's great to have you back on the Scott Sand Show. My big question is what happens now to all of the outstanding legal cases that were pending against Donald Trump?
We've got a couple things to consider here. We've got the state cases in Georgia and New York. And then we've got the federal cases. So let's take the federal cases first, because I think those are going to be sort of the easiest to resolve. Those get resolved one of two ways. The first way would be if Donald Trump, once he takes office, he's going to have a new attorney general appointed. You would assume that that part of the prerequisite for that job is going to be, hey, are you going to fire Jack Smith, right? That's going to be on the job application.
That's pretty much the only job interview question is, hey, what happens to me?
Right. You know, can you work weekends? You know, these types of things. But that's going to be the main question. Assuming that that's the case, then that attorney general would almost assuredly fire Jack Smith. Now, that's not easy. You have to have cause to fire a special prosecutor. You have to show some type of misconduct. You have to show some type of conflict of interest. That said, I mean, I think they'll find something where they can, you know, I mean, even if it's tenuous, they'll argue something for him, and then they'll litigate that part of it. But that's the first way that this case goes away. Another way that possibly goes away, depending on the margin of victory here, depending on whether or not Donald Trump has a mandate, and I'm not a politician, so I stay in my lane here. Joe Biden might pardon him at this point. Joe Biden might call him into the Oval Office and say, hey, you know, for the good of the country, let's just we're done here, and let's just go ahead and pardon you. In that instance, Trump might refuse a pardon because when you accept a pardon, you're also sort of accepting a little bit of responsibility, right? So Trump may not. But then again, I mean, if he was going to pardon himself, then you know what's the difference, right? So I mean, I would rather, if I was Trump, I would just take the pardon and say thanks, and you know, and I think everybody would get it. On the state level cases, you've got the New York case where you've got sentencing in 2 weeks on the 26th, 3 weeks from now.
Well, can I before you go there, just back to the pardon real quick, and we're talking to attorney Jeremy Rosenthal, TexasDefenseFirm.com. On the pardon, I mean, Joe Biden could phrase it in a way where I'll pardon you for any crimes that may or may not have been committed, or past crimes, past offenses that may not have been proven. There would be a way to word that, and that would be a pretty unifying message to the Democratic Party and to the rest of the country as well.
I mean, I would think so. And pardons, they can fit into one of two categories. You can have a really broad stroke pardon, like when all the draft dodgers were pardoned, right, as a big, you know, group. Or you could have a real specific, I pardon you for possessing this amount of drugs on this date in Utah, whatever. I mean, you can make them as specific as you can, and you want to make it, if you're the president, you want to make it as broad as you can to get done what you need to get done. Again, I'm not Joe Biden, and you know, Joe Biden may, you know, he doesn't listen to Jeremy, and he may, well, I mean, right?
I do.
Well, thank you, Scott. And you know, in all fairness, Joe Biden also doesn't pay me. People who pay me listen to me, and sometimes people who pay me don't listen to me. Is the shocker, right? So you know, it's the way it goes.
And as we're talking about paying lawyers, there are thousands of attorneys spread out across the country today who are extremely disappointed there are no legal challenges to the election, and the loss of their billable hours is amazing, probably.
Yeah, you know, it's funny that you mentioned that. I was we were planning in advance of today on legal topics to cover, and one of the things that I was kind of digging into is, all right, well, let's talk about ballot challenges. Let's talk about, poll hours and that type of stuff. And yeah, so none of that stuff. So I guess I just have to practice law today.
Right. By the way, there's alerts popping up on some of the news networks right now that Special Counsel Jack Smith is in talks with the DOJ to end the Trump cases. So it may just die on its own.
Okay. Yeah. And yeah, there you go. So that may, and I think that prevents this coming to a head, which is just, if Donald Trump's going to be the president, it's just not good for the country, regardless of whether you think he did it, regardless if you think he didn't do it, regardless of your political persuasion. It's just not healthy to kind of keep, to sort of pound these dead horses, if you will. And look, I mean, elections are powerful things. The people have spoken. So you ought to listen to them.
Yeah, the DOJ traditionally has not prosecuted a sitting president either.
Right, and that's by policy. The president-elect doesn't have those protections. I think that's more of a formal title. I don't think I think there are some deadlines and some timelines where you begin to get briefings, where you begin to actually sort of legally transition into office. I don't think they would really come into play until after the Electoral College certifies it. But right, I mean, this is all pretty apparent. I saw in my new feed that Vice President Harris is prepared to concede today, which would end really any kind of legal challenges. And so yeah, this is happening.
Yeah. So to the state cases.
Yes. Right. So in New York on the 26th, there's a sentencing hearing. And in that instance, the judge has a lot of discretion. Judge Marchand has a lot of discretion. He can put Donald Trump in prison for up to 20 years. He can say, go with the bailiff. Legally, he can do that. I think everybody at this point would think that that's pretty far-fetched and not in the national best interest. Although when you're a sitting district judge in Manhattan, you're really not considering the nation's best interest. You're usually considering, can this guy handle, pissing in a cup, for 4 years at a time, right? That's sort of where right. So that's kind of where your analysis ends. Pardon the pun.
And a presidential pardon would not extend to the state charges.
It would not. It would not. The governor potentially could, but yes, you're correct. And so the judge has the discretion to put him in prison. Probably won't. In all likelihood, what you'll see is one of a couple things. He could permit Trump to appeal the case before sentencing, which would, I mean, you're just sort of delaying the inevitable, because if that conviction comes back and is affirmed by the courts of New York, and those types of convictions are statistically, you're unlikely to reverse it on appeal. You're just looking at sentencing him in the year 2027 when the man is the sitting president. That's hard. Or you can put him on probation, which is probably where my money is, which is, you're not going to have to report. You're not going to have to do this. You're not going to have to do that. Check in with me in 2029 on January the 21st. After you're done with office, and we'll see. If you've been a good boy, then we'll, and my 401k is fine, then we'll let you go.
It probably doesn't need to wear an ankle monitor. I think we'll know where he'll be during that probation as well.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. I've had this debate with other lawyer friends of mine, and actually other judges that I know, and we were talking this year, or 2023, does Donald Trump represent a flight risk? Right? Is this a guy who's going to, right? I mean, sometimes you see political people in exile, and what one person came back, a really interesting point, saying, look, he is the most secure person in the history of all prisoners. He's got a 24-hour government detail with him at all times. He's not going anywhere, right? And if they get wind that he's going to go leave and go to somewhere else, no, they're not going to let him do that. So again, I mean, he's already got it around him, the government 24/7. So that part of it's taken care of.
Yeah, and what happens? And this may be a question you can't answer either, but I mean, there's a lot of speculation that one of his first acts may be to pardon all of the people imprisoned because of January 6th. I don't know politically if that's the right move. If you're trying to unify the country and January 6th has been such a flashpoint, I'm not sure I want that to be one of the first steps, one of the first actions I'd take in office.
You're definitely right. That's going to be a lot more sensitive of a topic, and you've got several things to consider on that front too. Okay, you've got a lot of people who have already served their sentence on those things and have the conviction, and not all of these January 6th cases are equal. Okay, it was a really ugly day. I think we can all agree on that, and there are some people who. In this big melee or the big riot, whatever you want to call it, there were some people who really were more guilty than other people, right? And that I think would be something that would be looked at if he's looking at pardoning people, or if somebody got disproportionately punished relative to other people. To your point, I think you were correct. If you are trying to unify the country, this is not the first place we do it.
Good stuff. Jeremy Rosenthal, attorney, TexasDefenseFirm.com. Great to have your insight on this, which is a question on many people's minds today.
All right. Well, thank you, Scott. Happy to visit with you, and have a great rest of your day.